had been accused of throwing rocks, and that's why they had been taken to prison. They didn't know that at the time. That kind of goes into judicial Israeli processes. But eventually they found out they had been taken because they had been assumed to be throwing rocks. They did not throw the rocks. They were pretty insistent on that when I was talking to Omar. He just really wanted me to know that he was good and wasn't throwing rocks. But good question. The others?
Second question. Yeah,
Actually, I have a question. I'm just curious, which language or languages did you use mostly during your time in the Palestinian territory?
That's a good question. So I am trained in Darija Arabic, Fusha, which is Quranic Arabic, and a little bit of Ammi Arabic, so that's Palestinian Arabic. So mostly I was using Fusha and Ammi, so Arabic.
And is that the languages that they mostly use in their population?
Yes, yes.
Some ignorance on that one, but I was just
No,
curious how easy the communication was, because obviously you're talking about very complex topics, and I was just curious how much may have been lost in translation or not being there, or how well you were able to communicate on complex topics.
Yeah. So I took 2 years of Arabic here, so all the Arabic classes we have here, and then I studied the 3000 level in Morocco in Fusha Arabic. So when I was in Palestine, I was using Fusha Arabic the most, I would say, but trying to use Ammi words as much as I could because they're very different from Fusha. I'm pretty confident in my Arabic, so I don't believe that the likelihood of things being lost in translation was very high. Of course, it's possible. I know that if I ever wanted clarification on things, it was appropriate and okay to use English as well. Omar spoke English as well, so we were using a mix in that case of English and Fusha Arabic. But that's a good question.
Other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
What can we do in our day-to-day lives to support children like the ones at Project Hope or Palestinians in general? What can we do about this big issue you're talking about?
That's a good question. So one of the biggest things that we can do in the United States is realize the role that the United States plays in occupation. There's a lot of politics on that, and it's not popular to talk about. But you can find through research online and through talking to people that the United States pays $38 billion to the Israeli military in the course of the next 10 years. So the biggest thing that we can do as Americans and people that want to help is to be participating in the BDS movement. And the BDS movement is a boycott movement that boycotts companies that work out of the Israeli settlements. This is not a popular thing in the United States right now. I will go ahead right now and tell you that there are 23 states in the US where it has been made basically illegal to participate in this movement, even though you're boycotting human rights violations. So it's not popular, but if you want to help, that is the best way to help. And to read, talk to Palestinians.
Other questions?
No question is a dumb one, ask away.
I'm curious what the difference was between the kindergartners that you noticed.
Yes, yeah. So the big difference was the girls from the refugee camp were very, very quiet. For the most part, they would sit with their hands on their lap and just look at their feet. And I couldn't get them to do much of anything. And it was a success if I got them to look at me or smile. Did not want to participate. The boys from the refugee camp were, if you were going to label things as like troublemakers, God forbid if it rained, because the umbrellas would come out and those would be typically the boys that were poking people and sword fighting in the back. Lots of fun. But the kids from Nablus, the girls were very participatory and so were the boys. So there was a lot of behavioral differences that I noticed. And from talking to Palestinians, I hypothesized that what this could be was long-term stress that was being caused from being in the refugee camps. Israeli soldiers often demonstrate in these camps, so that can be anything from walking through the streets looking very intimidating or shooting anybody in the streets. And that's something I know on a personal experience. I lived 5 minutes away from this camp, and so you can hear everything that goes So it is very common. I would say that happens a couple times a week. So that's the big difference I saw there. It's a good question.
What were some of the things that you wish, oh, I could, prepare this more so that I can have a, even better experience while you were there?
That's a good question. I'm sure there are many things. The one that comes to my mind right now is time. I wish I could have spent so much more time in Palestine. And when I go back to Palestine and Israel, I will make sure that I have more than a month to be walking around and talking to people and make that a priority. Because I learned a lot at Project Hope, but now that I've gone to the West Bank, I feel a little bit more comfortable about what the setting is. And so now I feel a little bit more prepared to stick to my own schedule and walk around and talk to more people now. So that's what I would change in the future. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I saw you first. Yeah.
That's okay. So can you talk a little bit about like how your identity as an American or identity as a woman, like how that might have influenced your experience or how you think it might have?
Yeah, that's a good question. So at this point, I had been living in the Arab world for a couple months now. So, and before that, I've always wanted to go to the Middle East. So I knew what was expected of me as a woman in Palestine and Morocco, that stereotypically speaking, I would be perceived better if I fit the stereotype as more quiet and certain things like that I noticed. Americans are really interesting in Palestine because it's not common to see an American in Palestine. The way I look is the stereotype in Palestine for an Israeli person. And so mostly people were just cautious with me at first because I didn't know what I was, if I was Israeli or if I was Swedish. There's a lot of Swedish people that go there. But once I found out I was American, it was like, oh, that's so interesting. I've never met an American before. Like, but not many Americans go there. It's not common at all. So that's something that I would say stuck out to me the most. Is that what you had in mind?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Sarah?
You said when I go back to Palestine, so I was wondering what your next steps were.
That's a good question. My next step is, right now I'm interning at a media organization called Arab America. And I'm basically in charge of writing Palestinian stories. So that's something I'm doing now. When I graduate in December, I will be interning at the Palestinian Embassy in DC. And I'll be doing the social media accounts. So I'm hopefully going to be continuing this spreading of narratives. That's my goal, is to keep Palestinian stories entering the United States and hitting more people. Good question.
Great. Any other questions? All right, let's give a round of applause to